Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. Today I am doing a kickback to a previous video that I had done and had a lot of fun recording. And that is a recommendations video saying if you liked a certain anime, then I think you will also like this book series. This is obviously primarily a book channel, and even though I watch a lot of anime, I don't foresee myself doing a lot of videos in that vein. But every now and then, if I can find a way to integrate it into my book videos, then I find that really exciting and really fun to put together. So I felt like enough time had passed since I did the last video, and I wanted to put a second one together for all of you. For anyone who didn't watch the first video, this is not intended to be an anime recommendations where you find really niche shows or anything like that. It's more me pulling from really well-known anime and really well-known books and matching them together so that people who don't have a lot of experience on one side or the other can find some fun recommendations. I tried to pull a few different genres in this video, a couple of different types of shows, a couple of different types of books, and I have matched them together either because I feel like their plot works really well together, or maybe the themes or the style or things to that effect. So I have 5 recommendations to give today. And the first one is kind of the combination that made me interested in putting this video together again, because I recently watched this show and read this trilogy at the same time, and I felt like they paired together so well. So for my very first recommendation, I am going to say if you enjoy the anime Vinland Saga, then I also think you will enjoy the Warlord Chronicles by Bernard Cornwell. So both of these pieces of media are historical fiction. We have Vinland Saga, which is a historical anime that follows the main character of Thorfinn, who is a young boy who is raised amongst Vikings. This is set in the early 11th century, and you watch as Thorfinn and the Vikings, whose crew he is part of, take part in the political maneuverings that are happening in England. This, at least the arc that is covered by the first season of the anime, is primarily a revenge story that is focused around Thorfinn, who has to grow up very quickly. He undergoes a significant trauma when he is about 5 or 6 years old, and then grows up amongst some of the most brutal and unforgiving warriors in the world. It is a very bleak story, but there are some amazing fight sequences, and you feel very attached to Thorfinn's character and very invested in his development. There's also a very vibrant cast of secondary or side characters. And at least for me, this show was very bingeable. It was a show that kept you wanting to continue on after every episode, and the character development, the political intrigue, and just the overall setting really pulls you in. So I think that it is a fantastic action anime and great for anybody who likes historical fantasy, anyone who likes heroic fantasy, and anyone who likes amazing battle sequences. The book series that I paired this with, The Warlord Chronicles by Bernard Cornwell, is also historical fiction and kind of serves as a past history for Vinland Saga. So the Warlord Chronicles is centered around the myth of Arthur, which takes place in the early 6th century, so about 500 years before the events of Vinland Saga. So when you read them, whether it's you watch Vinland Saga, then go back to read Warlord Chronicles, or you read Warlord Chronicles and then go watch Vinland Saga, you get to see some of that historical evolution of Britain into England and the people who kind of come in and out of that political landscape. Much like Vinland Saga, the Warlord Chronicles focuses around a central character named Derval, who we follow initially as a young man and then up into young adulthood and into adulthood. And we see the story of King Arthur carried out through Derval's eyes. Again, in terms of tone, these are very similar. So the Warlord Chronicles does feel a little bleak when you are reading it. You don't get that same kind of romantic notion of honor and justice that you might get from a typical Arthurian retelling. This is a much more gritty and realistic portrayal of the legend. But Derval is a fantastic character. There are also a lot of vibrant and wonderful side characters to follow in this trilogy. And everything from the characterization to the prose to the battle sequences are all top notch. So This is one of my favorite anime that I have watched in recent years and one of my favorite trilogies that I have read in recent years. I recommend both equally and hope that if you have not checked them out, that you will do so. Shifting gears a little bit for the second recommendation, I decided to throw in my lighthearted suggestion next. These two, or this pair, I have paired together because of tone rather than content. So on the anime side, I'm going to say if you like the anime One Punch Man, then perhaps you will enjoy reading Terry Pratchett's Discworld series. And again, before we start, because if there are people who have watched and read this, they'll be like, where are you going with this? These are nothing alike. In terms of content, they are nothing alike. They do not cover the same ground. But in terms of the tone and the goal, I think, of the works, there are a lot of similarities. These are both, in my opinion, brilliant works of parody/satire. This is not a long enough video to get into what the difference is between the two of those, but they are humorous takes on common tropes made specifically for fans of a particular genre. So in One Punch Man, the anime, we follow the story of Saitama, who is a hero as a hobby. Basically, he's a hobby hero. He goes out, fights crime just for the fun of it because he feels like it, and he is exceptionally overpowered. His whole, I guess, backdrop to his character is that he can defeat any villain with a single punch. Hence the name of the anime, One Punch Man. And this, for people who are longstanding fans of this style and this genre of anime, know is a throwback to some of the, overpowered characters that we have seen in very well-known, very beloved series in the past. The creator of this piece of work has obviously great respect for the genre, and I think this is really, really funny. A lot of the situations, a lot of the scenarios will harken back to certain arcs that we all enjoyed from some of our favorite action anime or action manga of times past. And I just think that it's really, really well done. I have only watched season 1 of this show because I had heard that the quality kind of dipped down after that. But season 1 was fantastic and I highly, highly recommend it. Because I like the setup of One Punch Man, I tend to really like those kind of parodies, that humorous look on very common archetypes and tropes. And if you enjoy very thoughtful, very smart takes on common tropes and archetypes, then in terms of fantasy reading, I don't think you can get any better than Terry Pratchett. His Discworld series is a universe of interrelated stories made up of various mini-series and companion novels with characters that cross over into all of the different books. And there are lots of places to start. You can start with any of the various sub-series. I decided to start with the Death novels and have been working my way through those. And in those novels, Terry Pratchett likes to poke gentle fun at common fantasy tropes, common fantasy archetypes, but also just at the world at large, at the ideas of social justice, at the ideas of politics, at the belief systems that we hold, all the things that are important to us. He examines them through a critical lens. And while I think that Discworld is probably more intellectual than One Punch Man, I think that if you enjoy the style of one, then hopefully you will greatly enjoy the other. But I think that they pair fairly well together. For my third suggestion, this is an anime that I just recently watched and a book that I read a couple of years ago. And I'm moving more into the kind of whimsical fairy tale setting for this recommendation. And for this one, I would like to say if you enjoyed the anime Ancient Magus' Bride, then you may enjoy the novel Uprooted by Naomi Novik. So these books share a little bit in terms of plot and setup, and then also just in overall atmosphere and kind of the vibe of the story itself. Ancient Magus' Bride is a short animated series that revolves around a young woman named Chise and a mage named Elias. So the setup here is that we have Chise, who has for reasons unknown, given herself up into indentured servitude. The show opens up with her at an auction, and we have this mage named Elias who comes in and purchases her with the intention for her to act as both his apprentice so that she can learn the magical arts and also as his bride. And there's a pretty big discrepancy in terms of their abilities to enter into a relationship, to understand each other. We have Chise, who has had a very traumatic and tumultuous life and childhood up to this point. And then we have Elias, who is not quite fairy, not quite human. We're not really sure what he is. And the mystery of his identity and how he interacts with the world is something that unfolds over the course of the show. But this has a very dark, fairy tale, whimsical kind of feeling. It is beautifully animated. It is gorgeous from the very first episode. It is just so, so beautiful. And it involves a lot of the kind of common tropes of those dark fairy tale stories, like a soft magic system and this grappling with what it means to be human. And I really, really enjoyed it. It's a slower pace anime, but for the beautiful visuals and the slowly unfolding story, I have to say that I really did enjoy myself when I was watching it. And as I was watching it, I found myself thinking back a lot to the novel Uprooted. Now, Uprooted doesn't get talked about a lot on BookTube because I think a lot of people feel uncomfortable with the central romance of the story. So the setup to Uprooted is very similar to the Ancient Magus' Bride in that we have a town that lives kind of in a little hamlet next to an enchanted wood. And there's a guardian who guards over this town, and his name is the Dragon. And I don't know if it's every year or every set number of years, he comes into the town and selects a young woman to bring back to his tower as payment for his guardianship. And in this story, he chooses a young woman named, I think it's Agnieszka, but I'm really sorry if the pronunciation is not correct. But he chooses her to come back to her tower, and she also serves as his apprentice, kind of an apprentice and kind of house servant, to be honest. She is expected to tend on him and then also learn magic from him. And much like there is a barrier between Elias and Chise in the anime, there's also this barrier between the dragon and Agnieszka because the dragon is long living. He has been alive for many mortal lifetimes. And over time, his humanity has slowly started to erode away. And so the way that he interacts with this young woman is completely unacceptable, completely inappropriate, but very much a product of the type of life that he has been living up to this point. I do not intend for this to be a debate over whether or not this is a healthy depiction of a relationship in fantasy, but I will say that my interpretation of it was that he had kind of slowly been almost calcifying over time and wasn't sure how to handle the intensity or the intricacies of human interaction and human emotion. So the things that I did really like about Uprooted was the gorgeous prose. I think Naomi Novik paints a beautiful picture of this dark fairy tale setting. And I think that is what really matches up well with this anime. If you like that atmospheric fairy tale feeling, then I think that you should give either of these a try. If the premise of Uprooted or the considerations about the relationship really bothers you, then you could probably also pair this with Naomi Novik's other book, Spinning Silver. It doesn't have those same plot threads, but it does have that same beautiful writing, that same lush prose, and really beautiful world building. So if that's something that you would prefer to match up with those, then I think that those could go very well together as well. For the fourth selection, I have a very, very, very popular anime that I am going to pair with another trilogy. So for this one, I am going to suggest that if you like the anime My Hero Academia, then you may enjoy the young adult fantasy trilogy Renegades by Marissa Meyer. So My Hero Academia, if you are at all involved in anime, if you watch it at all, then I'm sure you have heard of this. It is a giant super well-loved series that focuses on a young man named Midoriya who is growing up in a world where people are born with superpowers called quirks. And there is a huge range of these quirks that can be used in lots of different ways. But if you are strong enough to be thought useful in terms of protection of the city, protection of the world, then you can enroll in a school for people who have quirks. And then you get to go and train to become a superhero and work for kind of this league of superheroes. So we have Midoriya, who wants nothing more than to be a superhero, whose biggest idol is All Might, who is kind of the number one superhero of their world. And Midoriya is born quirkless. He does not have a quirk. He is unable to attain his dream until through some twist of fate, he is able to inherit a quirk and then try out for a place at this prestigious school. And we follow Midoriya's coming of age story as he tries to learn to master his powers, as he struggles with what the idea of being a hero is, and as he is forced to come to terms with some really difficult situations over the course of his kind of coming of age. It's a really exciting anime. There's a lot of really interesting powers. It is long running, so I guess you can be warned before you go into it. And as with all long-running anime, at least in my opinion, there are some arcs that are really exciting, and there are some arcs that kind of drag and feel a little bit more like filler. But this is beloved by many, and I also really enjoy watching it. If you're looking for a book that can pair well with this, or you're looking for some of those superhero vibes, you want a similar story, then I think that you may enjoy Marissa Meyer's trilogy. The Renegades trilogy I read a couple of years ago and kind of binged them back to back. These are very easily readable stories. They're chunky books, but very quick to get through. And the setup is very similar. This story follows two main characters, Nova, who is a super villain, and Adrian, who is a superhero in training. And the setup is very similar to My Hero Academia, where you have a world in which certain people are born with powers, and those powers have kind of a full range of intensity. So some are very easily used for the protection and safety of the populace. And this is what superheroes have become, is kind of the protectors of the earth. And we have Nova, who is a young woman living kind of on the outside of society, who has this secret, I believe it's hidden at the beginning. I believe she has this secret reason to despise superheroes, and she wants nothing more than to bring down the entire power structure. So she devises a plan to infiltrate the group of superheroes and kind of bring them down from the inside. And much like in My Hero Academia, a lot of this is kind of coming of age content about a young girl who needs to come to terms with the way that she feels the world works and the way that the world actually works. She has to explore the very nature of heroism and what it means to be a hero versus a villain. And there are just a lot of really fun and imaginative powers along the way. I will say that in order to give full disclosure, I need to tell you that I did not enjoy the way that this series ended. I felt like it was really compelling, really strong, explored some things that I was not expecting from a YA series. And then at the end, I was reminded why sometimes I can find YA fantasy to not be entirely satisfying. So I did not enjoy the way that the series wrapped up, but I have to say, if you like superheroes, if you want to read about some really imaginative powers, and you just want a book series to throw onto your TBR that you can blaze through, that is just a lot of fun to read, then I think that this would make a great addition, especially if you are a My Hero Academia fan. And that brings us to our final recommendation. So in my last video, I did one movie recommendation, and I'm going to do the same in this video. And I am going to say that if you enjoyed the animated film, I believe from 2007, called Sword of the Stranger, then I think you would like the book Sword of Kaigen by M.L. Wong. Now, Sword of Kaigen is a book that I have recommended in like a million videos on my channel. I talk about it all the time. I'm sure most people know what it is about by this point. But I thought that these two paired together really well in terms of some of the content, but also because they both contain some of the most stunning displays of swordsmanship that I have either watched or read about. In Sword of the Stranger, we follow a young boy, I believe his name is Kotaru. We follow a young boy named Kotaru who is being pursued by Ming soldiers. They are trying to capture him for some reason. We are unsure why they are after him. But he stumbles across a traveling Ronin who is nameless, and he saves him. So he saves him from these soldiers, and then the two become an unlikely duo as they pair up, and this past samurai tries to, I guess, bring him, to escort him to a safe haven. The one catch is that they are being pursued by soldiers, and this nameless man has made a vow to never raise his sword in anger again. He has some sort of unknown violent past that has prevented him from being able to engage in any type of sword fight. So it makes for a very interesting setup. It came on my radar when Patrick mentioned it in one of his videos about his favorite fantasy tropes, and he had mentioned the kind of grumpy mentor and child forming a bond, and that was why he enjoyed this work, and that part is also really good. So if you enjoy that trope, then I think you would also like this film. In this film, there are a bunch of action sequences, a bunch of battles, and one of the most thrilling animated sword fights that I have ever watched. It is so good. The movie is quite short. I really enjoyed it. It, in terms of plot, is pretty straightforward. Like, there's not a lot of things that come out of left field, but for the simplicity of the plot, the action and the way that it is animated is just beautiful and totally, totally worth the watch. Similarly, because I've talked about Sword of Kaigen so much, I will just quickly give you an overview, but it follows the story of a mother and her son as they live on a strip of peninsula called the Kaiganese Empire, and they serve as kind of a fortress between their empire and the outside world. The people who live on Kaigen are trained in an ancient form of sword fighting that involves some elemental magic and some sword play, and we follow this mother and son as they kind of live on this island, train, fall into their respective roles and what's expected of them. Fantastic story, but the part that I really want to highlight here are the battles. I have read a lot of fantasy. I really enjoy heroic fantasy, action-focused fantasy, and I have a whole video about people who I feel write the best action sequences. You have great names like John Gwynne, Joe Abercrombie, Bernard Cornwell. You have tons of them. But never have I been as emotionally invested in a sword fight as I was in Sword of Kaigen. It's not even the technical writing, which I think is good. It's not even the understanding of swordplay, which I also think is very good. It is the pure emotion that is present in all of Sword of Kaigen, but in particular 2 of the battles. There are fights in this novel that you will never forget because of the emotional resonance, because of the impact that it has on the characters. And for that reason, I feel like it pairs really well with Sword of the Stranger. They are both phenomenal, totally worth checking out, and I think that they pair fairly well together in that if you like one, then you will likely enjoy the other. But that's it. Those are my 5 recommendations. I really, really enjoy doing these. I find them to be a lot of fun. If you have read and or watched any of these selections, then please let me know. If you have read any of the pairs together, let me know if you feel like these are good selections or if I am totally off the wall with these recommendations. Like I said, I don't often get the chance to talk about anime on the channel, and it will continue to be books into the future. But if you are a fantasy book lover who also enjoys anime, this is your chance to get into the comments and let me know what your favorites are and what books they remind you of. I will see you with another video soon. Bye!